Hey, I'm Rich. I build stuff. This is part 4 of my B-17 build playlist. I'll sum it all up for you right now. I try and sort of succeed, sort of fail to repair a car remote. And I figured, might as well do something besides fill in sand. Yeah, look, I have a life outside of YouTube, okay? That's why these videos are, rather short and they're like a month apart. Anywho, all right, enough of that griping. Let's actually go ahead and get to the part where I get to the video and then learn, oh, I did a whole bunch of other stuff too.
Ironically, this is one of the longer videos. But yeah, the long and short is removing those recessed panel lines as well as preparing the model to be kind of assembled and put in a way that makes the whole thing go together. But I mentioned something about a car remote, and we are going to get to that. I'm going to overlay it a bit over some of this footage, make it a little more interesting.
I actually really like that idea. Ooh, that's frickin' brilliant. That is freaking brilliant. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do it that way. Yes, okay.
I figured it was too good of a moment not to share that, but basically, this is where I had the idea of, oh, hey, I can leave the kind of gouged out remains of the panel lines if I follow it with the, Tamiya scribe, then just smooth everything over after and try to leave it so it's all sanded. But the remnants of the putty I used, since they're a different color, and yeah, dark foreshadowing music. But since they're a different color, when I did the panel lines and filled them in with putty, I'd be able to use that as a kind of a guide rather than having to measure and use electrical tape. Spoiler alert: we're gonna have to do it the hard way. But what I'm doing the easier way right now is filling and sanding and smoothing in that top piece of the fuselage, that cockpit bit, which in a little while it breaks and I do reinforce it. But here's my initial, run on smooth something, fill it in, smooth it out, and mixing the putty with thinner, the regular thinner I use through the airbrush, just to, make it, try to slip into those seam lines. And we'll see what I actually hear.
Okay, so after a bit of drying, not sure how much the camera's gonna reveal, but it's basically there's a little bit of the putty in these cracks and crevices, but not a whole heck of a lot, and definitely not enough to really fill them in proper. Guess I've got my work cut out for me.
And by work, I mean not only doing the other fuselage half with the same idea, which we fully realize isn't quite going to work in a moment, but also then fill, the whole, take the putty, mix it about 50-50, it was with thinner, I think, and then, put it in using the gloves just to kind of, squeegee it into all those cracks and crevices. I try a different method where I use the actual sculpting tool I have later to try and concentrate it, but that isn't nearly as fast or honestly get quite the good results that the first glove and thin way did it. Alright, you ready for it? Is the music going to do a crescendo? Are we going to finally realize that this idea of cover it all up with the putty and then sand it down and leave the crevices filled was wrong? Yes, and here is why. Priming! And hiding all those lines under primer.
Alright, so I just did a light airbrush of primer just to see how things are going with, smoothing this out. And, yeah, it's looking pretty good, although, again, it's, the primer did, obfuscate a bunch of these lines. But the point of this is just to see how smooth we're getting. And we're getting there bit by bit.
And yeah, looking at things after the fact, yeah, this is really smooth. But as you can see, there I am in the corner. I'm doing a bit of work with something. But in the main screen, and I think I learned a few moments, oh hey, I'm obfuscating that car remote, is, yeah, you'll see me working on this car remote. Basically, I take it apart, I clean it out, I try to put it back together with some epoxy, and that's about what that is. So tell me if you like this way of doing a video where I've got, things kind of, going in a corner and then coming out in the main screen. I'll see if I can't do it a little more. But, yeah, what you see in the corner with the model itself is just me filling, sanding, And now you see I've switched because that model, it broke, and it was a bit more interesting to show that, you know, and the way I repair it. The way I repair it is I drill a thin hole through those plastic areas to fit a copper wire in, a really thin one, that'll actually act as structure. And then I use a combination of sprue glue, both in that gap as well as in the actual, around the wire itself, to make a good, strong, reinforced bond for that nose point. And here's what I was talking about, putting, you know, the putty directly into the panel lines, you know, using the sculpting tool. Meanwhile, in the corner of the screen, you see I've taken out the PCB that actually runs that car remote thing, and I found out how those buttons go together. And again, you can see me switching screens. There's a battery for the car remote in the main screen. There's my big bald spot, and yep, you'll see me looking at the little conductive buttons that are on top of the little flexible thing, hidden by the ginormous bald spot. Oh, well, here we go. I zoom in a bit more now. You can see those little silver discs are the button things, you know, in this remote. And you'll see there's also some glue-ish thing on the remote's flexible bits. So I figured, okay, we're going to clean all the schmutz off the PCB and try to clean some of the schmutz off of the remote. And that's what the isopropyl was. I used isopropyl alcohol for that. I have found that fairly safe on electronics, but again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an electrical engineer. Do your own research. You know, you are liable for what you do to yourself, yada yada. By the way, spoiler alert, while this repair looked like it worked at first, it isn't working now, so I either have to use a different epoxy or take a different tack if I really want to repair that remote. But okay, back to the model. As you can see, the main screen is me just filling everything in as best I can. And eventually I abandon the using the sculpting tool to direct where this goes approach, and I go back to the use a glove soaked and thinned out putty method. And honestly, as I said before, that did tend to work a bit better. Overall, it was a bunch of fill and sand and fill and sand. Yep, kind of a sleepy process, which is why I've, you know, been sifting around the car remote footage and I guess big bald spot footage, although that's everything. But yeah, so I'm just in that lower corner of the screen there. You can see me actually doing a bit of cleaning of my tweezers, so I can with some of the epoxy I have available. Actually, and it might actually be a bit further in that I do attach things. But yeah. It does eventually just get attached with a two-part epoxy later, you know, after being under the bald spot. Okay, and the screen switches again to that main footage, and as you can see in the little corner bit is me priming, an initial prime on the fuselage half. And another thing I do with those is, during that priming, is I actually will clean, after the sand, I clean it off with high pressure, through the airbrush at least, and just water sprayed to get, you know, all the stuff off. Then I would spray with air to, you know, get it good, and then I'd reset the pressure back down to like 12 psi, which is what I like to use for painting. And then that's when I did the primers after. And I'll be able to describe another thing I did in just a moment, but we got a part that's in normal speed where I actually talk.
Alright, so yeah, and the great thing is I can actually kind of dodge this thing a little bit, and it's again over my shoulder, yay. So, yeah, as you can see, I've put a bunch more fill into this thing. Have to wait for it to dry again, then do even more sanding. Hopefully, though, it's starting to get together and will soon be smooth enough. Especially if the dog don't bark and disturb me. Quiet, dog. Then hopefully it'll soon be smooth enough. Things like this will be out. Things, you know, like this will look smooth and flat. That I'll actually, you know, give a kind of a primer coat to see if it's smooth enough, and if it is smooth enough, then I'll do the next step, which is going to be trying to assemble this in a way that'd be similar to how it'd be in the final model, enough for me to actually, you know, start, you know, getting things a bit more even, a bit more, you know, yeah, even and, you know, filled in properly, all that, so it actually looks correct. Because I'm going to have to play some games with this to somehow make it, you know, look as seamless as possible in terms of getting it, you know, into its position, as well as, of course, all this internal stuff lining up appropriately. I'm gonna have to think out. I'm also wondering, because I've got this kind of setup, and it does look quite way different than these previously, installed lines. And what I'm wondering is, do I want to just say the heck with it and smooth the whole insides out? But being honest, all this extra detail does add a lot of time to the model, and there are other models I want to get to. Namely, 1/200th scale Bismarck, which I would like to do similar treatment to as I've done for the Dreadnought. I also would like to resurrect the Dreadnought at some point.
It really is sitting there on my shelf crying out to me. But as you can see here, I repeat the whole fill-in, gouge marks with putty approach for the interior that I'm going to have to sand next time. Kind of similar to what this fuselage half is getting now. And yeah, it's really about it for the video, except another normal speed moment here, and then the thrilling conclusion of the car remote. Did it at least go back together for more than 10 seconds?
Alright, so I think I've gotten these both to a point where it'd be reasonably worth it to do a kind of, sort of like test and unifying code on them all assembled, so I could start maybe getting at least this fuselage worked out right. But there's a couple problems if I do that. One, the obvious being, how do we fit in the insides, Rich? How do we do that now? So I have to have this in a condition and the interior in a condition before I fully do that. But in doing that, if I then have it all fully in there, and then I go doing everything, these pieces are going to be put under a fair amount of stress. Like, I can see this ending, with things internally breaking. Then what do I do? So I'm going to find a way to temporarily glue the fuselage bits together and provide enough structure so I can get this guy into a correct enough position, so that when I do have that all nice and fitted, it actually all looks reasonably good and still fills in okay. So I'm wondering now is, do I try... On the one hand, I could try something like maybe Elmer's glue if it's not going to stick super strong to the sides here. Or I could try bits of super glue, because in my experience, super glue will split pretty easily, actually. But I don't want to use a ton of super glue, especially not in places where it might seep into some of the alignment pins, because that'd really suck. But once I have that set up, I can then get these halves into a way that will actually work good, and then I can actually have this kind of sort of readied, if you will, kind of like a prequel to the actual building portion of this. The other thing, though, having this together will let me do is after I paint it, I'll then be able to see where there's still going to be witness marks and whatnot, and how bad they are, so I can decide if I want to try filling them in with just like the straight Mr. Surfacer, or if I want to do something else like depending on the shape, I would call it battle damage or something, which honestly sounds like a pretty good plan to me. So I guess my question now is super glue or Elmer's glue? Alright, so I'll zoom this in a little bit just so we can all get a closer look. So my current little convention of green for stuff we're adding, yellow for things that were where we're going to try to hide electronics, and then the red was for stuff to be eliminated, right? That's good for if you're not priming over things, and if you're don't need to say obliterate or obfuscate all the internal details to make them look more even with one another. And that difference is really more pronounced on this piece here, as you can see. One way I could do this is to go ahead and obliterate large, portions of the details and then work it that way. But that's going to make it, that's not only going to add a lot of work, it's also going to be a bit messier than we'd like. But what if I did it a slightly different way? I could leave one set of these, lay these over, and then leave the other sets in, obliterate the other sets of them, so that I could just replicate the detail, using these, you know, and having other bits as guides. I risk damaging quite a bit of the, you know, painted, you know, marked up stuff, but that might actually be, that probably would lead to better looking results. Yeah. Okay. There's an idea. So I went ahead and, oh, one accidentally splashed thinner on this. Darn you, thinner. But number two, off camera, I also did it with primer, just to see how you know, good or poor a job I did in obliterating the, you know, the quote-unquote false seam lines. And I honestly think I did a really good job, all things considered. Now I gotta wipe this off. Yep, that's gonna take a bunch of this stuff with it. Yeah, so in case y'all are wondering what this weird textured thing at the back here is, apparently the B-17 had, like, some of its control surfaces, like including the rudder, parts of it were actually fabric over a frame. So that's why you have this kind of effect here. I think that is actually historically accurate. You know, and I'm not sure if raised panel lines would be historically accurate, but I hate okay. I would not spend so much time and effort to obliterate the panel lines and redo them as recessed if I did not absolutely hate them. Okay? So, yeah, anyways, now I'm going to go ahead and make some more putty and try to, again, seal up the, you know, parts where it's still, you know, got visible lines. My thoughts being that way, I can actually make a lot of progress. Or I can, you know, more focus now, because things are more even, on those areas that really need the extra attention. Then again, do another run of sanding and smoothing, and another run after that of the the primer, and then we can, you know, have this thing be all nice and super evened out and filled in, and there we go. Okay, and just about perfect. Alright, I'm going to go ahead now and make another video segment of me just filling things in again.
And fill things in we do. And yeah, again, as I've hinted at in the audio voiceover for this, I do end up getting those little conductor discs back into the car mode, you know, if you can see through my big bald spot. But yeah, the other thing is, as you can see now on the main screen, I have in fact switched over to the soak finger in gloved finger, or the important gloved finger in the putty thinner mixture, and then just let it, you know, ooze in that way, smooth it over that way to get the smoothest results. Another thing I do, I'm not sure if I've mentioned it in the slower speed segments, is I had actually also taken used the primer and modified a trick that boat modelers will use to make panel lines in small boats, where basically I just layered gobs and gobs of primer on to try and smooth everything out that way. And the panel line trick is you put like tape on your boat model to replicate the panel line pattern, and then what you do is you create ridges that way, you know, with a thick coat of the primer. Alright. Anywho, time for me to change the music and, you know, celebrate the fact that that controller did go back together, and it did work really good for, like, I don't know, maybe a couple hours. It was better than it was before. Yep, and then there's me at the bottom just sanding everything down and trying to get as smooth as possible before that thicker primer coat that I've pointed out. And there we go. And now we have just this big thick primer coat here. Alright, we're done. Almost, except for the outro part of the video. And yeah, it's just me hemming and hawing to myself while preparing to prime again. I find hemming and hawing is actually a very important part of this hobby, thinking out how do I want to do this a little differently than what the instructions said. You know, because the instructions will get you there, but they won't get you amazing. This gets you amazing, at least in my opinion. Alright, here we go for the outro.
And here we are! 2 seconds for me, maybe an eternity for you. Thank you for sticking through that if you did. Hope I made it pleasant. If not, well, there's always next time. But anywho, so yep, I took the model, did my best to smooth some things out of it, so that next video I can go ahead, get everything loosely put together, and then try to add some exterior panel lines. And it might seem weird to do the exterior before doing the interior, but again, I'm hoping I mentioned this in the video, that, by having the crunchy interior not connected to your model when you do all the exterior fiddly work, you can avoid damaging that interior. That's kind of what I was thinking, because there's a lot of fiddly work that I plan on doing to that interior. Case in point, Case in point, remember the markers? Yeah. I've realized I'm going to have to probably do some interior working as well. That's separate from anything assembled on this or other bits. But that is neither here nor there. I am Rich. This has been part 4 of my B-17 build playlist. Hope you liked it. And, well, if you did, guess I end with the YouTube dance because that whole thing's annoying to see in the beginning. Like, share, subscribe, hooray! Peace out!